Here at this school, the president, Abdullah Gül, will be casting his ballot. The Turkish media have been here from the early hours to catch a glimpse of him casting his vote. Also from the early hours, queues upon queues of people have been lining up to cast their votes in an election that will be decisive not only for the capital Ankara but for Turkey nationwide. It is very tight here in Ankara. A lot of people waiting to see whether the AK Party will be able to retain their control of the capital as well as manage that victory percentage that they're looking for nationwide.
And we've mentioned this before, this election coming at a particularly bad time for Prime Minister Erdogan after those weeks of controversy, leaked audio recordings, corruption scandals. I want to start, though, actually taking you back to May of last year. Remember the protests, these ones in Gezi Park in Istanbul. Erdogan was accused of a heavy-handed approach there with those protesters. In December, a series of corruption investigations led to the detention of dozens of officials and their family members, most of them from the Prime Minister's AK Party. The Prime Minister subsequently removed dozens of police chiefs from their posts and reassigned some judiciary members as well. Then there was that audio recording that I mentioned before. This is taking us through to, well, just a month or so ago, February of this year. An alleged conversation between Erdogan and his son in which he warned his son to hide large sums of money, though Erdogan did say the tape was fake. And then most recently, when the Prime Minister ordered a ban on Twitter and YouTube, claiming those social network sites were being used to spread corruption allegations against his government. Live to Ankara, Abdullah Bozkurt is with us. He is the bureau chief of the Today's Zaman newspaper. We thank you for your time today. Look, when I mention all of those things that have happened to the Prime Minister since February of last year, it looks like he would be deeply unpopular. I'm still trying to get to the idea of how much support he might actually have. Abdullah, can you hear me all right? It's Kamal here in Doha.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Excellent. Look,
yes.
Can I just ask you, I listed a whole lot of problems that Prime Minister Erdogan's had. I'm still trying to get an idea of how much support he actually has. People who do think he and the AK Party are right for Turkey.
I think we will see the results of the election by the end of tonight, and to get some sense of how much damage the party has been inflicted after the corruption scandal, freedom of the press issues, banning Twitter and the YouTube, social media. There are different pollings done before the election, but most of them are not reliable. So I think we'll see tonight how much damage actually the Prime Minister Erdogan has suffered. But looking from the different pollings, if we can get some sense of it, probably below 40%, between 35 to 40%, we will see the local polling. But this election turned into a national election or the vote of confidence. Sort of for the Prime Minister himself, because the result of the election will be determining the future career of the Prime Minister and his political party. Whether he will go for the presidential election or he will call an early election that's scheduled next year in 2015.
It's almost unfortunate, isn't it, for the actual... If I can just interrupt you, sir, it's almost unfortunate for the actual candidates who are running for councillors and mayors today because they're being overshadowed by their Prime Minister.
That's true, Prime Minister, and as well as other, leaders of the other political parties. They have been, traveling across the country, trying to make, issues. But most of the agenda is fixated itself on the corruption. So nobody actually talk about the local candidates, their characters, or what kind of services they will be providing for the electorate. And from the electorate side, from the voters' angle, I think they are also focused on the corruption scandal, and that's what we will see. I think at the end of the day, how much the voters actually will pay attention to the corruption, or whether they go for the stability or the economic issues, which many people suggest. The Prime Minister himself is implicated in the corruption scandal, and he's, banning Twitter and YouTube, freedom of press issues. He has become a factor himself for the instability for the future of
Abdullah,
Turkey.
just quickly,
so I think we'll see how the voters make up their mind on that.
Okay, just briefly, if there is a lot of damage done to Prime Minister Erdogan, if by the end of the day we see there is deep unpopularity for the AK Party, what do you think would happen next? Would it be likely that protests would start again?
There is a possibility of the street violence after the election if there is a widespread fraud and irregularities in the polling station. So far, we have been receiving an isolated reporting in a couple of provinces, but it's not a large scale. But if, especially in Istanbul, in Ankara, which is the largest city and the other is a Turkish capital, if there's a very tight race and there's a huge disputes gonna come out, then we might see a violent protest after election. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, and if the margin is wide enough that nobody is willing to challenge the final decision by the election commission. But if this election result doesn't resolve the lingering grievances among Turkish voters, then the only way to express their dissatisfaction and their frustration with the government is to take up the streets.
Right. Abdullah, we thank you for your time today. Abdullah Bozkurt joining us there from Ankara. And we just check in briefly again with Istanbul now as we wait for Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan to cast his vote. This is a school in Istanbul, which is doubling as a polling station today. Members of the public casting their votes. The Prime Minister himself expected to come to this polling station. Well, we don't know when actually, but we'll bring it to you exactly when it happens.